Hello, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Chrissy Delcor. I am the Chief of the Promotion Board Operations. Today I'm going to discuss how the Selection Board Secretariat Directorate is set up, the roles and responsibilities of each branch, promotion boards, officer responsibilities, and post-board actions. This is a look at how the Selection Board Secretariat Directorate is set up. We have 3 divisions. Promotion Eligibility Division, PBE, is responsible for verifying eligibility for approximately 9,500 officers annually. They manage PRFs for 100% of the mandatory Guard, Lieutenant Colonel below, and Reserve Colonel below promotion boards, as well as all position vacancy PRFs for Reserve, Major, and Lieutenant Colonel boards. They process all Reserve promotion orders for Colonel and below, and submit orders for upload into members' online records. This section also processes and manages date of rank calculations, competitive category updates, accelerated promotion requests for reserve members, the active duty list to RASL active status list transfer, and propriety of promotion actions, your PPAs. The next division is the Promotion Board Operations Division, PBO. They're responsible for building and executing Air Reserve Component Promotion and Continuation Boards. They prepare and push ARPCM convening and release promotion messages, officer promotion guidance updates, and any updates to officer promotions. They also build boards in AFR, the Electronic Board Operating Scoring System, EBOS, and they upload eligible officer records to EBOS. Part of their duties is to manage EBOS operations pre, in, and post-board. This division executes Senior Rater ID updates, but only for eligible officers meeting a promotion board. Additionally, they prepare and outbrief board reports and promotion stats to NGB, Chief of the Reserve of the Air Force, the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force of Manpower and Reserve Affairs, and the Undersecretary of the Air Force. They also prepare and send promotion scrolls to the Pentagon for SECAP and POTUS approval and Senate confirmation. The last division is Promotion Policy, PPP, and they are the Reserve OPR for the Reserve Officer Personnel Management Act, meaning they ensure compliance with Title 10 and other promotion policies specific to the ARC. This division prepares promotion-related advisories for Board of Correction of Military Records, your BCMRs, and Evaluation Reports Appeal Boards, your ERABs. They build and manage special selection boards and special boards, which are your SSBs and SBs. And they are responsible for assisting officers with letters to the board, and they review and process about 800 letters annually. Lastly, they conduct on average around 400 post-board counseling sessions per year. Here's an overview of the types of boards conducted by the Selection Board Secretariat at ARPC. First off, we have our mandatory boards, which are governed by law. These boards consider all eligible officers in and above the promotion zone. In the zone is your IPZ, and it signifies the officer is in the zone, and this is their first mandatory board. Whereas APZ, above the primary zone, is the officer's second or more board. ARPC executes 5 mandatory boards per year. However, for promotion to first lieutenant and captain, eligible officers meet a process, not an actual board. This process occurs twice a year. Position vacancy boards are held to consider exceptionally well-qualified officers for early promotion. Officers must be nominated by their senior rater and must be the sole occupant of a higher graded position. Your special boards and your special selection boards are boards conducted by law to correct an error. They may be BCMR, ERAB directed, and or approved by the ARPC Director, Selection Board Secretariat. These boards are held as necessary in conjunction with our mandatory boards. Last is the selective continuation boards. They're held at the Secretary of the Air Force's discretion. These boards are typically held following the 04 or 05 board with the intent to retain twice deferred officers in specific AFCs or specialty codes. If an officer elects to continue, they are continued for the length of time outlined in the Secretary of the Air Force's MOI, which can vary between 2 to 3 years. Any officer in a continued status can continue meeting future promotion boards if they meet the reserve eligibility requirements. Here you'll see the selection board schedule for CY20. As you can see, the line and non-line competitive categories for Colonel has been split out, as the line will take approximately 2 weeks due to the new 6 line competitive categories. I'll discuss this new line competitive category later in this brief. Additionally, you'll see that the first lieutenant and captain process again occurs twice a year, and it must be noted that the first lieutenant and captains is a process and not an actual board. This information is posted on MyPERS, and it's posted annually, so you can go out there and you can take a look at it anytime. So here we see the selection board schedule for next year, CY21. Again, you'll note that the line and non-line Comcats for Air Force Reserve Major, Lieutenant Colonel, and the Colonel boards, which are our bigger boards, have been split out as line will take approximately 2 weeks due to the new 6 line competitive categories. We're projecting it out for 2 weeks. However, they may not last 2 weeks. This is all new to us, so we are going to see what happens, but we're anticipating it will take 2 weeks to get through those boards. Again, this is posted on MyPERS, so if you just go out to Air Reserve, Officer, Promotion, you will see that the calendar is posted. So this slide reflects the entire promotion process for each board, starting at the coordination of eligibility criteria for the board, which usually begins about 225 days prior to the board convening. The promotion board is scheduled to be convened for 1 week, and then for our larger boards, again, for the line only, we are projecting 2 weeks. In the post-board phase of the process, which is your +7 through +75, which is presidential approval, the president has actually delegated approval authority down to the Secretary of Defense level for Lieutenant Colonel and below promotion boards. However, the 06, our Colonel board, still requires presidential approval and Senate confirmation. So it must be noted that once we do the outbrief up in DC at the Pentagon, these board reports are up there and they are being routed, so they can take anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 weeks for approval. So as I mentioned before, the calendar for officer promotions is out there on MyPERS, but there's a whole bunch of other information out there for officers to take a look at. This information is updated as necessary or on an annual basis. Some information that you'll want to take a look at are your ARPCMs, which are your convening notices, or your promotion release messages. Also the board schedule. And if you look in the pre and post board information, we've got some guidance and directives out there, as well as the AFIs, which are very helpful. So one of the most important things that we push out are the ARPCMs, which are our convening notices. It is highly recommended for any officer needing a promotion board to go out there and take a look at the ARPCM and make sure that they have read through it. A lot of questions that we actually get from members is about eligibility, and in our ARPCMs we have eligibility factors and criteria. So first stop, always go take a look at the ARPCM. Again, these are posted in MyPERS. A copy of this information is also sent to the FSS and MPS, and they usually get this 4 months prior to any board convening. Included in our ARPCMs are milestones. So when you go look at it, you want to make sure that you're taking a look at those milestones, because these dates are pretty important. We always tell officers, pay particular attention to the PRF due dates, the last date to update MIL PDS, and when letters are due to the board. These dates are solid dates. We have no wiggle room on that, so you want to pay attention and make sure that you are staying on the timelines. So time and grade refers to the number of years required in that grade before you are considered for promotion to the next higher grade. Members meet a promotion board prior to their time and grade, so if promoted, they can pin on following when the time and grade requirements are met. However, there's a caveat to this. If a senior rater elects to promote an individual who has been selected for promotion, they can do that. So you may not have that time and grade if your senior rater has elected to accelerate your promotion. For our mandatory boards, as you can see here, for Major to Lieutenant Colonel, members meet the mandatory board at 6 years time and grade, and if selected and approved for promotion, they will pin on at the 7 years time and grade time. For PV boards, Major to Lieutenant Colonel, The member must have 4 years time and grade to meet the board, and if selected and approved for promotion, will promote effective the public release date or once they've reached 5 years time and grade, whichever is later. So part of our eligibility check for officers meeting any promotion board is their RASL time. So what is the RASL? The RASL is the Reserve Active Status List. Every officer in the reserve is on a RASL. So the rule is you have to have 1 year time and grade in order to meet a promotion board. However, we will use a combination of your active duty time in conjunction with the RASL, as long as there's not a break in service. If there's a break in service from going from active duty to the reserve, you must have a full year on the RASL prior to that promotion board. So there have been some changes recently in the officer promotion world, and one of those changes was the PRFs. So what is the biggest takeaway from this? The PRFs have gone from 9-line to 2-line. It's no longer a summary of the officer's career based on what is in your OPRs, but it is more of an opportunity for the senior rater to tell the selection board why they should or should not promote an officer. The only strats now allowed on the PRFs have to come from the senior rater, and the senior rater is only authorized up to 2 strats. The PRF must be signed by the senior rater. This is fixed by policy. So for officers serving in the grades of captain and major, the senior rater is typically the first colonel in the rating chain who's serving as a wing commander equivalent. For officers serving in the grades of lieutenant colonel, the senior rater is the first general officer in that rating chain. For guidance or instructions, refer to the corresponding ARPCM for a particular board, or you can look at AFI 362406. So PRFs are mandatory for officers meeting an 05 and 06 board. If a senior rater is pushing somebody for PV promotion, then we must have a PRF for them. And also, if a senior rater is electing to not promote a officer, which are do not promote PRFs, a PRF must be submitted. So here's an example of what a PRF looks like for a mandatory board. So as you can see, I just covered this. The senior rater is fixed by policy. It is required for officers meeting a lieutenant colonel or colonel board. You have to have comments in a PRF. That is required, and it is stated in the AFI in table 8.1, and I believe it's rule 12. It specifically says any officer on the RASL has to have comments are mandatory. So again, because all reserve officers are on the RASL, we have to have comments in our PRFs. We leave the promotion zone blank, which is section 5. In the reserve, we do not use that. If you look at the stratification in the group size, this is a stratification for a definitely promote PRF. In this example, we say it's 2 of 5 of 10. So what does that mean? It means the officer is ranked number 2 of 5 officers awarded a definitely promote from that senior rater. The senior rater has 10 officers in that competitive category meeting the promotion selection board. So 2 of 5 of 10. So here you see an example of a PD PRF. One of the biggest takeaways from this is if you are being nominated for PV by your senior rater, they have to submit the PRF, and they have to submit it no later than 45 days prior to the convening date. If it's submitted after that 45-day mark, so let's say 44 days prior, we will not accept that PRF. So this is a very hard date, and you must make sure it's submitted on time. So one of the biggest differences for a PV PRF versus a mandatory is you have to have the position number included. And then if you look at the stratification, it's a little different. So in this example, we have 2 of 5. So again, the officer is ranked 2 of 5 officers. The senior rater has 5 officers in a competitive category meeting the PV board. So in this example, the senior rater only has 5 that he's submitting for PV, and this person is 2 of 5. So as an officer, meeting a promotion board, what are your responsibilities? Again, I can't foot stomp this enough. Take a look at the ARPCM, read it, make sure you understand it. A lot of questions that we get, the answers are already out there in the ARPCM. Okay. But take a look at it. If you have questions, go talk to your MPS. If they can't help you, then definitely contact us through MyPERS. Some of the other things that you want to take a look at, you want to look at your officer selection record. It is your responsibility to make sure that your record is 100% accurate or accurate to the best of your ability. There are some things that are out of our control. If you have an OPR that was submitted late, it may not be in your record, but as long as you show due diligence in trying to get your record correct and updated, that works in your favor. So where can you go look to check your officer selection record? The first place I tell everyone is to go check out PRADA. PRADA is the customer's platform to review your online records. So you want to make sure that you have all of your OPRs, any training reports, mandatory LOEs, any in all of your decorations. That stuff needs to be in your record. So make sure you're checking to see if that stuff is out there. If you can see it in PRADA, we will see it on our side, and it will be in your officer selection record when your record meets the board. Also, if you get a notification in MyPERS that you have an EOSR pending in VPC, you want to go check that. So the ARMS contractors, 6 months prior to any board, they do a scrub of what is in your actual record versus what is reflected in the MilPDS system. If there's any discrepancies, they will send a notification out through VPC. And this notification comes across to you as the EOSR. So go out there, take a look at it, see what they have identified as a discrepancy, and then try to make corrections to that prior to the board convening. You also want to take a look at your officer pre-selection brief, your OPB. Your MPFs get this about 145 days prior to any board convening, and they typically send it to the officers around the 130-day mark. So if you're 130 days out from a board and you have not received your officer pre-selection brief, I would recommend you go to your servicing MPS and request that information. Make sure you take a look at it. It is a quick snapshot of your career. So you want to make sure the information in there is accurate and up to date. If you see anything wrong, it is your responsibility to try to correct that. And in the ARPCM, it will tell you how to make those corrections if you see something wrong. So here's a quick look at what PRADA looks like. Again, this is your resource to take a look at your online records. So you want to come out here, you want to take a look at it. And again, you want to make sure that you have all of your OPRs, training reports, LOEs, decorations, all that stuff is out there. Okay, so you just want to make sure that it's in your folder. Again, if you see that you're missing information, you need to take steps to get that stuff corrected. So here is a snapshot of what your EOSR may look like. Again, this is a one-time data push from the ARMS contractors to let you know if they have found a discrepancy between, again, your online records and what is reflected in MilPDS. Again, there are steps on how you can correct your stuff. So take a look at the convening notice. And at any time, if you have any questions, go talk to your MPS, or you can send a ticket in through MyPERS to Officer Promotions, and we will help you out. Okay, so another new change in Officer Promotions is the new line of the Air Force competitive categories. So effective October of 2020, the ARC transitioned to the new line of the Air Force competitive categories for officers meeting major through colonel promotion boards. The line competitive category has gone from 1 category to 6. The 6 categories allow for more tailored development paths for career fields across the line of the Air Force. The developmental agility achieved in these new categories is critical to an ever-changing world. An officer's core AFC upon the board accounting date determines the competitive category that they will meet and compete in for promotion. So moving forward, it is really important for eligible officers meeting any promotion board to take a look at their core flag ID, and make sure it's correct. If there's errors with the core flag ID, the chances of you being in the wrong competitive category are very likely. So you want to make sure that you're checking that your core flag ID is correct. And if it's correct, you're going to be in the right competitive category. Okay, so the officer pre-selection brief. Again, this flows to the MPF, and the MPS is about 148 days prior to the board convening. And it is their responsibility for pulling this information out of the AFPROM system and sending it to the members. For members who've been nominated for PV, they may have to request a copy of their OPV from their servicing MPS. It's for our PV noms. When you're deemed eligible based off of your date of rank. However, you're just eligible to meet the PV board. Your senior rater has to nominate you for this board, which is why it's a little different. So if your senior rater is going to be nominating you, you need to go to your servicing MPS and ask them to pull your OPV from the system. Once you get your OPV, again, it's a one-page snapshot of your career. Make sure you review it and make sure the information is correct. So the OPV becomes the officer selection brief, which is your OSB. And this is the document that is put in your officer selection record in EBOS for the board members to review. We usually do this poll 3 days prior to the board convening. So again, if you see any errors on your officer pre-selection brief, take corrective action and try to get it updated as soon as you can. So some of the things that you want to look at when you're reviewing your officer pre-selection brief, personal data, again, core flag ID, that is something new that is on the officer pre-selection brief. You want to make sure that's correct. If that's correct, then your competitive category is going to be correct. You want to make sure your developmental education is reflected. For our rated officers, you want to make sure your flying information is up to date and reflected. For our medical professionals, if you have board certifications, it's not going to say yes on your officer pre-selection brief. However, when we go in board and we pull your officer selection brief, if you are sitting in an AFC that has an H or an M prefix, it will say yes. If you don't have the M or H prefix on your AFSC, it's not going to show yes on board certification. However, we know that our medical professionals have certifications, otherwise they wouldn't be practicing. So what are you supposed to do to get your certs in your record? Because they're not part of your official officer records, you have to submit any certifications you want included in your OSR to my office. And how do you do this? Go look at the ARPCM. The directions are out there. So you want to make sure decorations are all up to date and reflected, your assignment duties, any duty history, and then participation points. All this stuff is looked at by the board members, so you want to make sure it's accurate. If an error is found after the board has convened, you may not be eligible for a special board or a special selection board. However, if you've been actively working to correct discrepancies prior to the board convening, but weren't able to get these discrepancies or errors fixed, you can submit for a BCMR or ERAB, and you could be found eligible to meet one of our special boards or special selection boards, but you have to show due diligence. So that's why I'm saying if you see something wrong, take every action you can to fix it. So here is what an officer pre-selection brief looks like. Again, I've circled some areas on here that are kind of new. Again, the core flag ID and the competitive categories, those are now going to show the new line competitive categories. And again, you want to make sure your core flag is correct. And then also a new area that hasn't been on officer pre-selection briefs before is our wounded warrior. So if you're a wounded warrior, if you've been identified and you have that AFSC, it will now be reflected on your officer pre-selection brief. Okay, so now we're going to talk about letters to the board. So the Air Force offers every eligible officer the opportunity to write a letter to the board regarding any matter he or she feels the board should know. The letter must be submitted in good faith and contain accurate information to the best of the officer's knowledge. You cannot put anything in your letter to the board that contains information prohibited by Secretary of the Air Force. So, for example, if you're enrolled in your developmental education and you haven't completed it, you cannot say that in your letter. If it's not done, it's not done. It's not going to be reflected on your officer selection brief. So basically, you telling the board members that you're enrolled or you are almost completing it is considered hearsay because there's no proof of that. So rule of thumb, you can write whatever you want in your letter. Once you submit it to ARPC, we will take a look at it. And if we find anything prohibited in there that you've mentioned, we're going to go ahead and send it back to you. And we're going to tell you what you need to take out or what you cannot say. So if you have any questions, I say just put it in there. And then once we review it, we'll let you know. Letters must be submitted no later than 10 calendar days prior to the board convening date. If we have received your letter by that 10-day mark and we do find corrections, we will send it back to you, but we will still accept it. If you've submitted it for the first time after that deadline, we won't accept your letter. These letters can be e-signed, and they don't have to be wet signature. And typically, the technician's process is pretty quick. So once you submit it, they will take a look at it, and you'll probably get a response in a day or two after submitting. Keep your letters brief and to the point. Don't write a long narrative because the board members may not read everything you're writing. So get to the point and just tell them what's going on, okay? So after the board results have been approved and publicly released, those who were not selected for promotion can request post-board counseling. So when an individual submits for post-board counseling, the technicians here at ARPC will pull your records as met by the board. So whatever the board members saw, they are pulling those records. And they are going to provide you feedback on any strengths or weaknesses that they have identified in your record. What they can't do is they cannot tell you why the board members voted the way they did because they are not privy to that information. So all they're doing is pulling your record, reviewing it, and telling you, hey, you were missing a couple OPRs. In order to make your record more competitive, you might want to try to get those missing documents in your record. So once somebody has submitted their post-board counseling request, the counselors will pull it. They'll start building your post-board counseling, and then they should conduct the counseling within 4 to 6 weeks after submission. Okay, so how can you help yourself when you're meeting a promotion board? If you're a member meeting a promotion board, again, read the ARPCM. Okay, there's a lot of great information in there. Most of your questions might be answered if you just read it. Review your EOSR and VPC if you get a notification. If you don't get a notification or if you don't have identified discrepancies in your records, go check PRADA. Just take a look at it, make sure your record is tight. Okay, again, you want to have all your OPRs, any training reports, declarations, all that stuff needs to be in your record. If you identify anything missing, make corrections. Again, review the ARPCM because it tells you exactly what you need to do and how to do it. Review your officer pre-selection brief because you want to make sure that information is accurate. Again, that document is used in board. We just call it something different. We call it the officer selection brief. So we will take that and we will put it in your officer selection record, and the board members are looking at that information. If you are an IMA, AGR lead, or VLPAD officer, your servicing agency is your RAGAF, MPF, or FSS. Even though you're a reservist, you are assigned to an active duty unit and you're sitting in an active duty position. So they are your servicing MPS. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to us and we will try to help you out. Or if your servicing MPS has any questions, they can reach out to us and we will help walk them through how to pull your information out of the system. Your servicing MPFs are responsible for providing you with your officer pre-selection brief. So you want to make sure if you have not received it and you are eligible to meet a board, that you contact your servicing MPF and get that information from them. Okay, so if you are a servicing agency, which means you are a member of an FSS, MPS, debt CSS, or just a CSS, when we release the ARPCMs for any board, you should be getting a notification through My PERS. Go out there and take a look at the ARPCM, make sure you guys are reading it and you are understanding the information that is documented in there. Once we have built a board and you are notified, we need you to pull your master eligibility list, which are your MELs. And you should be doing this weekly because eligibility changes and you may have adds or you may have deletes on your MEL. So you want to make sure that you're looking at it and you're reviewing that stuff weekly. Any adds or deletes, you need to communicate that through ARPC to our eligibility section, which is PBE. Make sure that you are pulling the OPBs from AFRONs and that you're sending them to the eligible officers. Provide your senior raters with the MELs, the DQHBs, and the PRF notices, because these are suspensed. Now, some FSSs have their senior raters sign the MEL. You can do that, absolutely, but we don't require the MEL back signed. So if they sign it, that is yours to keep. We don't need that. And then you guys are like kind of like the belly button. So make sure if an officer comes to you and they have questions, do your best to answer their questions or to help them update their records or, you know, get them ready for their promotion board. However, if you guys have questions or if it is out of your swim lane, if it's just beyond you, please reach out to us. We will do everything we can to help you guys out because we want you to be successful and we want our officers to be successful.